Hi, I'm here with a little bit of a different video than my usual content, but a type of video you've definitely seen on the YuGiTube space before, which is getting a non-Yu-Gi-Oh player to evaluate some Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Now, in the words of MBT, the problem with a lot of these videos is that they choose cards that are not generic, way too many archetypal cards that are just impossible to evaluate if you don't have the context of the deck they're built around. So, hopefully, I've picked some cards that just fix that issue. I'm here today with Buzz. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good.
What is like your past experience with card games, if at all?
Well, pretty much none. I've never been into like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon TCG or anything like that. I didn't get into Yu-Gi-Oh cards until just a few weeks ago. And well, I grew up. I watched a couple of episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh growing up on like Saturday mornings on like the CW block where they had Yu-Gi-Oh Zexal on. And so I used to watch that back when I was like 10 years old, and I had no idea what was going on, but it just looked cool to me. More recently, when I, gotten back into anime and stuff like that, I wanted to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh, so I started reading the manga. So I read most of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, and that's what got me into the card.
The game has, of course, changed a lot since the original series, and if there's any card types you haven't seen before, I'll, of course, explain how they work. I'll explain any mechanics that may not be immediately obvious. I stumbled across your channel because you uploaded a video where you're doing a little pack opening and stuff, and I always really like seeing new people introduced to the modern cards and the reaction to them and stuff, and I was actually really surprised that you don't have more subs than you have with the quality of the videos you put out. Yeah, I'll obviously link you in the description and everything, but like everyone, you should absolutely go and have a look at Buzz's content. Well, without any further delay and time for ad revenue, I will get us started with the first of these 10 cards I have for you, okay?
Alright.
Alright, so first off I have this one, Foolish Burial Goods.
Send one spell trap card from your deck to the graveyard. You can only activate one Foolish Burial per turn. So it's a card that kills your own cards, right?
Yeah, any spell or trap you want from the deck, you just put directly into the graveyard.
Interesting. I gotta be honest, it seems good, right? Like, what if someone can absolutely ruin your deck through one of your cards and you want to quick ditch a card? I feel like it could be useful. I feel like it's like a tactical card you probably wouldn't normally need.
So, do you think it's playable in, like, competitively, or not?
I would say so.
You're actually pretty spot on. So, this is not a card that just every deck can run. It's certainly not one that most decks run, but it has and is pretty... It's not like that used right now. Actually, wait, no. It is actually used right now in a tier 1 deck.
Oh, is it?
So the reason this card is so good and pops up from format to format is because there are certain spells and traps that have effects when they're in the graveyard. For example, this one's very notable for it, is Metal Foes Fusion, which was used... It has this effect to do a fusion summon, but you didn't play it for that. You played it because you could, in a deck called Sky Striker, which wanted a lot of spells in their graveyard, because a lot of their cards said, if you have 3 spells in your graveyard, do this. So you would goods, and you would get this in your grave, and you'd have 2 spells engrave off of 1 card. But also, if it was beyond the point of 3 engrave, Fusion had the effect to just put itself back in the deck and draw a card, so you could just get back the card you spent to put it in the grave in the first place. Next one up is Victory Dragon.
Victory Dragon. This card cannot be special summoned. To tribute summon this card, you must tribute 3 Dragon-type monsters. If this card attacks your opponent directly and reduces their life points to 0, you win the match.
Yeah. So, in this case, it's referring to the best 2 out of 3. So if you attack with this in game 1 and 1, you'd instantly win the entire 3-game match.
So, looking at this one, I really only know the real basics about Yu-Gi-Oh, but it has 3,000 defense. So that makes me think that you probably don't have much to lose. For instance, if you try and use this card and it fails, because it has good defense, right? I was thinking it's kind of a glass cannon card. It probably has a weakness that can be equally as powerful as you winning the match instantly. I was thinking, like, if you can win an entire match in one move, this probably has some sort of really bad backfiring mechanic. That's what I would think. Otherwise, it would be so OP, like, wouldn't it? I would say that this card is probably pretty mid-tier. Usable in a deck, usable in a tournament, but not like a first choice.
This is a very early on card in the game. And this card is banned.
Oh, it is?
Yes. However, it isn't banned for power level. So there is one glaring... You were absolutely correct. There's one glaring weakness with this card. The rules... In the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! And most card games, you may concede a game at any time. Which means if your opponent summons this and declares an attack, you can just concede the game and it doesn't use its effect.
Oh, so you only lose one of the rounds, not the entire match. That's sneaky.
Yeah, so this card actually, even with that, if you couldn't do it, it isn't actually that good, because the problem with this card is the way you have to summon it. Because it can't be special summoned, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Mostly revolves around special summons now, to tribute it, has to use your normal summon, and you get one normal summon per turn. So to spend your normal to get out a monster that, like, life points are 8,000, so you would have to get someone down to 2,000 roughly with other stuff, and then this would have to, with no protection on it, get through directly. So yeah, like, it's not powerful, but it created situations where people successfully summoned this. You would have to call over a judge because one person would be like, why is my opponent allowed to concede when I summoned my victory dragon? On to the next one we got is... This one's a bit wordy for you, but there's not that many of these.
That's interesting. Now, I won't pretend I fully understand what that means, but you can shuffle both this card and all monsters from your opponent and all the monsters your opponent controls into the deck. So, my theory. This is like a last-ditch effort card. You can make someone reshuffle. If you think you're about to lose, you can say, alright, start over, right? Reshuffle. Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty good. I think it sounds pretty good. I feel like it's an old OP card where, like, it's an older card and it was OP, but now it's not anymore. That's my theory. It looks old, that's what I have to say.
Okay. So, this actually came out last year.
Really?
Yeah, and it did get hyped. It was hyped up a little bit because the idea is there was already a card that was in the game called Zeus. And I will summarize this one very short for you. Basically, what Zeus did was when you went second, Zeus's quick fight was just send everything else on the field to the grave, except itself. So people had this sort of similar idea that it would be something you would put up, your opponent would go to a situation where they try and out it, and then you would just use the effect and it would wipe the board. That's the basic idea. Unfortunately, this didn't actually end up seeing any play. And the reason for that is because it's not a reactive thing like Zeus is. Zeus is something you do when you go second into your opponent's board and you just wipe it. The problem is with WOLFRAYET is you have to go first and put it on the board. And your opponent then has they have 4 monster effects they can activate where they're safe from it. And it isn't actually that difficult to out this monster in under 5 effects. So it ended up a lot of the time, if you summoned it, your opponent would just deal with it with a spell or something before you would ever be able to activate the effect. I appreciate this is one of the harder ones, of course. It's one of the things that just looks really strong, but that's, yeah. Okay. Next up, I have Smoke Grenade of the Thief.
It seems good. But so if your monster dies while this one is equipped, you still lose the life points, right?
So this does not activate if the monster it was equipped to is destroyed because the spell wasn't destroyed by a card effect. It has to be destroyed. You know, Mystical Space Typhoon that just destroys a spell or a trap.
No.
No, that's one that's in the anime a couple times. But basically,
Oh.
you or your opponent would need to specifically use an effect that destroys this card. Battle wouldn't cause this to activate.
Then can't they just ignore it the whole game?
They could.
You know, I'm just gonna go out on a complete limb, and I'm gonna say this is probably an extremely good card, and I'm probably just assuming it's bad based off the artwork. It looks silly, it looks goofy, it looks like a card no one would ever use. It looks like some common. I'll bet it's awesome. I'll bet I'll bet it's really, really good and rare. That's what I'm gonna go with.
So for the longest time, this card was a very jank thing that no one really played because there just wasn't a way to do it. But now it is banned.
Oh!
And that is because eventually they released a deck that revolves around equip cards, and a lot of their effects say destroy an equip spell, do something, and they created a loop where you could just keep equipping this, keep destroying it, and discard your opponent's entire hand on the first turn.
Oh man.
See, you were actually kind of right that this is, yeah, it's a very old
Go,
card.
let's go.
Just didn't do anything wrong time, but yes, it is absolutely insane. Let's have a look at the next one, which is DD Crow.
DD Crow. You can discard this card to the graveyard, then target one card in your opponent's graveyard. Banish that target. So, I assume cards can come back from the graveyard. Does that mean it gets removed from the deck completely?
So, banishing used to be... So it's what they call removed from play in the older cards, and it was originally intended to be the sort of thing where, like, it's a pile of cards that you just can't access anymore. There is a lot more interaction with it now, but generally it's a lot harder to interact with cards that are banished than cards that are in the graveyard.
The effect sounds extremely overpowered, but I imagine there's a way to stop it from being used pretty easily. I think it's good. I think it's probably a card that gets ran.
That's pretty spot on. Yeah. So this card is one of it's what's called a hand trap, which is just sort of a monster that can be used from the hand in the opponent's turn, usually to interrupt them. And this is one of the oldest ones. It came out a long time ago, but it's had its stint to play all through the time, and it's actually really good right now. Because that tier 1 deck I was talking about earlier really, really likes putting stuff in the grave, and they have a bunch of effects that need the monster to still be there when they do stuff. So if you use this in response, that whole effect fails, and it basically can really, really hamper their turn. It's less insane now because they just released a bunch of cards that power creep this. So yeah, this has been good for a long, long time. For a lot of different reasons, but generally it's always gonna be good as long as the graveyard is good, which doesn't seem like it's gonna stop anytime soon.
Nice.
Alright. Next up, we have, I think, another short one. Exclusion.
Yeah, I mean, sounds good. It sounds really good. The complete lack of long, confusing text definitely is a plus for me.
Yeah, I tried to pick out a lot of shorter ones for you. There's still a lot of short card sets, like a lot of old cards are really, really good still today.
Yeah, it seems good. I would imagine it's useful even today. You know, I know almost nothing about like new Yu-Gi-Oh metas or anything, but just based off effect name here, it seems pretty good.
This is a fairly recent card. I think it came out at the start of the year. It was a common in its set, and this exhibits a problem that a lot of cards sort of have, which is it's too narrow in how it interacts. So, because it only negates effects in the hand, if you set this and then your opponent starts and they just put a monster on board and use its effect, this just doesn't do anything. Actually, a lot of the time, that discard effect is really bad for you because they get to choose, and there's a lot of cards that they could discard that then give them an advantage in the graveyard.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's true.
So, it's very on paper, very good effect, and it'd be very good in something like a draft format where there's a lot of hand effects, but yeah, in competitive it's just way too broad. And there are just cards that just compete with it that don't do as much, but just hit more things. So there's really good one that's been good across the years is Solemn Strike, which just negates any monster effect. You have to pay life, but it can negate any monster effect anywhere. It destroys the card, and it can also negate summons from the extra deck, which can be very good. So on paper, it's a good effect. It's just it's so conditional is the problem.
Right.
You have to. Trap cards are very slow now, and so if you want to have a trap card be good, it has to do a lot and be very broad. Cosmic Cycle. Very short one.
Pay 1,000 life points, then target one spell or trap card on the field and banish it. That sounds great. What the heck? So, you said it in Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! You have 8,000 points, right?
Yeah, I think that's always been the rules in the main card game, because 4,000 is very easy to drop down. Yeah. So you do have 8,000.
I imagine there's a way where you can stop the card, but you still lose the 1,000 points. That's my guess. I think there's a way to stop this card, but you still end up losing those 1,000 life points when you use it, so it's... I would say it's probably a very narrow use good card.
I think that's pretty close, actually. So this isn't a card you would put in your 40 card deck. It is technically sort of power creep of an existing card, sort of a space event which destroys a card. The reason that this is notable is while you do have to pay 1,000, there's some cards that can't be destroyed, or there's some that trigger if destroyed. So this basically gets around a lot of those protections. So it's a little bit of an upgrade from that. But yeah, it's not something you would put in your main deck, but you have for matches a sideboard of 15 cards. So in the second and third game of a match, you're allowed to take out up to 15 cards in your deck and put in up to 15 from the sideboard. So if you're playing against a deck that plays a lot of powerful spell and traps, but yeah, you got pretty accurate, I think, to the power level of.
Nice.
Another long one. This is probably the most complicated card on here. Orbital Hydralander.
Hydralander. Cannot be normal summoned. That sounds like a big oof on any ability it might have. Let's see. So, I take it it's like a kind of a blue eyes white dragon with worse defense and the ability to send cards to the graveyard. I would say like the ability sounds decent. The prerequisites, though, seem kind of steep. So I imagine there's not very many situations in a competitive play where you would be able to use it. But it seems useful, very tactical. And of course the 3,000 attack, you know, regardless of like the effect, it seems pretty good. So I would say it's probably a pretty meta card.
Right, so this card did see meta play briefly. So the problem with it is something you did identify, which is the requirement is very, very steep. In a draft format and in a format where this was good, that isn't a problem, because like in a draft format, for example, you would have a lot. You wouldn't have a lot of cards with the same name. The problem with this in a sort of tournament setting is you are basically sacrificing 2/3 of the cards you want to play for one card that has a decent effect. You would summon this, and then every turn, this would send 3 cards from deck to grave and destroy a card, and then those cards you sent to grave would have effects that activate and give you more advantage. It is too inconsistent and slow for today's metagame, but it is actually a decent card that's just been crapped out of the game by the consistency required for the modern game.
Huh.
It is a good card, and a very, very cool one.
Interesting.
Alright, I think we might be almost done with... Yes, this is our last card. Another synchro for you.
I mean, you know, he definitely looks powerful. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he is kind of thick, though. I mean, dang, look at those legs. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of throwing it back, honestly. Look at that. Look at that posture. Interesting. So, the effect seems like swapping cards. Like, if you have some cards you don't want to use, and you could swap it for the opposites, like the light and dark. Oh, so that's also... That could be a pretty negative effect, right? Because what if you have to discard or put in the graveyard like a really good card if there's one in the top 5?
Well, generally every card in your deck is going to be a very good card.
Ah, I guess so. There's no like clutch anime moments where the one card you need is at the top and the heart of the card doesn't work and it gets discarded.
In that case, you get to pick what you add, so... Assuming it's a light or a dark monster.
This one seems pretty good. I think I've been saying the same stuff for a lot of the cards, but this one's probably not meta. I would imagine this one was a card that used to be good and then is no longer played anymore. That's what I would imagine.
So, that is technically correct. This did used to be good. Until it was banned. This was banned a month ago.
Really?
Yeah, I think less than that. Something like that.
It's too thick for Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess.
So, the reason this was really good is part of a couple of reasons. So, it isn't just because of this. Like, so I didn't just pick something as like you can't know the context of, but the main like decks that this was first played in when it first came out, and it was good since it came out, was in a deck called Dragon Link, which played basically just all the best dragon cards in the game because Konami has a gigantic bias for dragons and has just been releasing broken dragons for the entire time of the game. They're by far the best type of monsters in the game. It adds a light or a dark monster, and most good monsters are light or dark. So basically what this said is, if you summoned it, and making a Synchro 8 is not difficult, you would summon this, just look at the top 5 cards of your deck and pick anything you wanted. So you would, which is really, really powerful when you're trying to dig for specific combo pieces. And then you would put the others in grave, and a lot of those would have effects in the graveyard. So you'd essentially get like
a double whammy.
So yeah, you would go like multiple extra cards generated from just him resolving once, and then he doesn't do anything else on the field. So you would just use him as material for something else, and then you could bring him back from the grave and use him again as material for something else. So you would get 2 boss monsters off him and combo pieces. And he was really insane in specifically dragons, but he started to be used just generically in any deck that made synchros, and it got to a really bad point with a archetype that came out recently called Punk, and what they do is make level 8 synchros incredibly easily. So it was basically that every single synchro deck in the game could just make this turn 1 guaranteed. Hey, well, that is all the cards I have for you.
Oh, it was fun. I definitely still don't really understand how the game works, but I think I'm gonna get there someday. I think so.
Yeah, I don't know how to do an outro. Deal with it, guys.
Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. Remember to like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, yeah, you probably please do, and yeah, subscribe to Buzz.